On a spring morning in 1811, a man walked out of a Paris prison who was supposed to be one of the most wanted criminals in France. The escape was staged. The guards were in on it. And the prefecture of police had arranged the whole thing, because this particular fugitive was about to become their most valuable asset. His name was Eugene Francois Vidocq, and for nearly 20 years he had been a forger, a deserter, and an escape artist who slipped out of cell after cell. Now the state wanted to put that talent to work. The question was simple. Could the greatest criminal of the age be turned into the first modern detective? He was born in Arras in northern France on the 24th of July, 1775, the son of a comfortable baker. By his own account, he was fearless and restless, a boy who learned the sword and the back alley with equal ease. At 13, he stole his parents' silver and spent 2 weeks in a local jail, a punishment his own father arranged. The lesson did not take. Arras in these years was a tidy provincial town of merchants and church spires, but Vidocq was already looking past its walls. He wanted the wider world, and in 1791, still a teenager, he found his way to it by enlisting in the army of a country on the edge of revolution. He joined the Bourbon Regiment in March of 1791 and marched into the wars of the French Revolution. He was present in 1792 at the cannonade of Valmy, the battle that steadied the young republic, and he rose to corporal of grenadiers. But discipline was never his strength. After striking a superior officer, he deserted, and from that moment his life became a chase. Through the 1790s, he moved through fraud, forgery, and a string of arrests, each one followed by another vanishing act. The uniform that might have made him respectable instead taught him something more useful for the road ahead. He learned how men in authority think and how easily they can be fooled. In December of 1796, a court handed Vidocq 8 years of hard labor for forgery and sent him into the Bang, the brutal galley prisons of the French coast. For most men, that was the end of the story. For Vidocq, it was the beginning of a legend. He escaped from Bisset. He escaped from the Bang at Brest. He slipped his chains, traded clothes with sailors and nuns, and disappeared into crowds again and again across a decade on the run. In 1805, facing a death sentence, he leapt into the river Scarpe and swam to freedom. Every escape sharpened the same instinct. He understood disguise, nerve, and the precise moment a guard stops paying attention. By 1809, Vidocq was exhausted by the life of a hunted man, and he made an extraordinary offer. Arrested again in Paris, he proposed to work for the police, not against them. They placed him inside Bicêtre prison as a spy, where for some 21 months he lived among thieves and listened. He learned their faces, their nicknames, the jobs they planned, the fences who moved their goods. When he had gathered enough, the authorities staged that fake escape in 1811 so the underworld would never suspect their most dangerous member had switched sides. The thief had become an informant. Now he wanted to build something no city had ever seen. Late in 1811, Vidocq quietly organized a small unit of plainclothes agents, and in 1812, the prefecture of police gave it official standing. They called it the Brigade de la Charrette, the security brigade, and it was a genuinely new idea. Until then, policing meant uniforms, patrols, and waiting for crime to surface. Vidocq proposed the opposite. His men would go undercover, blend into the markets and taverns of Paris, and find criminals before the public ever knew a crime had happened. He started with a handful of agents and a controversial principle. To catch thieves, he hired thieves, men who knew the underworld because they had lived in it. Disguise was Vidocq's signature. He could pass as a beggar, an aging laborer, a wealthy traveler, even a corpse when a case demanded it, and his agents learned to vanish into whatever role the street required. He insisted on patient, nonviolent methods, often drawing confessions out of suspects over a shared dinner rather than a beating. The results were staggering for the time. In a single year, his small brigade was credited with hundreds of arrests, sweeping up murderers, burglars, and the fences who kept the whole trade running. Paris had never had a force that struck so precisely, and the criminals who had once been his companions now feared the man they could rarely recognize. What truly set Vidocq apart was his obsession with records. He built a vast card index of criminals, each one carrying a physical description, known aliases, past convictions, handwriting samples, and the particular method, the modus operandi that gave an offender away. A burglar who always entered the same way, a forger with a telltale flourish, could now be matched to a name on file. He went further than any policeman before him. He made the first plaster casts of footprints left at a crime scene, turning soft earth into evidence. Long before fingerprints or photographs, Vidocq grasped the central idea of forensic science. Crime leaves a signature, and the patient investigator can read it. His inventiveness reached beyond the streets. Vidocq worried about forgery, the crime that had once condemned him, and so he commissioned chemists to develop a treated paper that smeared if anyone tried to alter the ink, making tampering obvious at a glance. He worked on an indelible ink for secure documents and banknotes. He set up a printing and paper business and tried, with mixed success, to employ released convicts so they would not slide back into crime. The state rewarded the reformed criminal at the heart of all this. In 1817, King Louis XVIII granted him a full pardon, and the man once sentenced to the galleys was now, on paper, an honest citizen. Vidocq's reign over the charade was never calm. His habit of hiring former criminals drew constant suspicion, and rivals whispered that his agents sometimes provoked the very crimes they then heroically solved. He resigned, returned, and in November of 1832, with cholera stalking Paris and the accusations mounting, he left the police for good. The brigade was reorganized without men of criminal record. But Vidocq was not finished with detection. In 1833, he opened Le Bureau des Renseignements, the Office of Information, a private agency that took cases for paying clients. Historians regard it as the first private detective agency in the world, the distant ancestor of every private eye who followed. His private bureau lived in a legal gray zone, and the authorities never trusted it. In 1837, police seized thousands of his case files, and over the following years, he faced repeated charges of fraud and overreach. One conviction in 1843 was overturned on appeal after months in the conciergerie, the grim old prison on the Ile de la Cite. He kept reinventing himself, writing about prisons and the death penalty, even offering his services to the government of 1848. By then, the world had changed, and the aging detective was a relic of an earlier, rougher Paris. The methods he pioneered, though, were quietly being copied by police forces far beyond France. Vidocq's true monument was built in ink by other men. His best-selling memoirs lit up the imagination of Europe, and the writers of the age could not resist him. Honoré de Balzac, who befriended him, poured his cunning into the master criminal Vautrin. Victor Hugo split him in two, the hunted convict Jean Valjean and the relentless Inspector Javert, both shadows of the same astonishing life. The double nature that made him so dangerous, criminal and policeman at once, became one of the great themes of modern fiction. When you read of a man who knows the underworld because he came from it, you are reading the legend of Vidocq. The line runs further still. Edgar Allan Poe, crafting the very first detective story, had his brilliant sleuth Auguste Dupin measure himself against Vidocq by name. Émile Gaboriau's scientific detective Monsieur Lecoq carried his methods forward, and through that chain of pages the idea reached a consulting detective in London named Sherlock Holmes, the figure who would define the genre forever. Every fictional investigator who reads a footprint, files away a face, or goes undercover is walking a path Vidocq cut first. The thief from Arras did not just catch criminals. He invented the way we imagine they are caught. Eugene Francois Vidocq died in Paris on the 11th of May, 1857, 81 years old, his fortune long spent and his heirs disputed. For decades, the French police pretended he had never really led them, embarrassed by the convict at their origins. But the record outlasted the shame. The undercover agent, the criminal database, the plaster footprint, the private detective for hire, all of it traces back to a man who learned crime from the inside, and then turned that knowledge into a science. He had been the most hunted fugitive in France. In the end, he became the blueprint for everyone who would ever do the hunting.